BlackRock, JP Morgan, and Goldman Sachs.
Globalists want your money, and they're willing to use the war in Ukraine to get it. Hello there, you Awakening Wonders. Thanks for joining me today. We're at a pivotal moment in history. It's certainly in the Ukraine-Russia conflict where we actually can see what that war is really about. It's globalism versus nationalism. We're going to unpack that now. Wherever you're watching this, on X or YouTube, we hope you'll find your way to Rumble Premium. That is ultimately our home. We stream 4 days a week, Monday to Thursday. We have great interviews and great content. Today's story is extraordinary because Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, and in a sense, a kind of remnant avatar of globalism in the same way that you recognise Justin Trudeau was, has pledged British troops and £12 billion of British taxpayer money in order to perpetuate this war. Over the next few minutes, we're going to explain how the Ukraine-Russia conflict involves BlackRock, the World Bank, and the EU, and essentially how you can see this as a globalist conflict. The way that you've been deceived is staggering and astonishing, and while it's going to make you furious to learn these facts and to see some brilliant reporting in The Telegraph, which is a legacy media newspaper, while it's going to make you furious, it's also going to give you a deeper understanding of why this conflict is so important. First, we're going to start with Keir Starmer's audacious pledge to lead British troops into war.
And I'm prepared to consider committing British forces on the ground alongside others.
I'm prepared to lead British troops on the ground. Let's just hope that this story doesn't lead to us looking at the intolerable image of Keir Starmer in a flak jacket. If it irritates you that I'm wearing some pseudo-military gear, bear in mind that I don't have any power to send children, or adults, to war or pretend that I'm engaged in a humanitarian mission when I'm actually advancing globalism. This is a staggering story. Amid the devastating war in Ukraine, British economic aid to the country is focused on promoting pro-private sector reforms and on pressing the government to open up its economy to foreign investors. If the aid was about protecting children and protecting Ukrainian territory, why is the economic aid focused on promoting private sector reforms? That's something to mark out. At a time when you're deeply cynical and suspicious about the actions of your government, the EU, the World Bank, globalism more broadly, and massive organisations like BlackRock, you would think that the approach to supporting this conflict financially would be, we better make sure that all aid makes its way directly to Ukrainian people, because otherwise people are going to be so cynical about it if they find out, for example, that it looks like we've been lobbying to change the law inside Ukraine so you can sell off a bunch of Ukrainian resources. And in fact, when you see Trump say something like, we will continue to support Ukraine, but only on the basis that they will provide us with minerals, that they will back up these loans or this aid with resources, suddenly you realise the difference between Trump and other politicians is he does publicly and explicitly what they do privately. And it seems to me that Trump is more geared towards protecting the inhabitants of his country than a leader like Keir Starmer, on top of taking advantage of you from behind, wants you to thank him afterwards and give him a lollipop. Recently published Foreign Office documents on its flagship aid project in Ukraine, which supports privatisation, notes that the war provides opportunities for Ukraine delivering on some hugely important reforms. Do you want to hear people talking about opportunity when you're paying £12 billion worth of additional taxes in order to support this conflict? Do you want to hear phrases like, there's an opportunity there? The government in Kiev has in recent months been responding positively to these calls. Last month, President Volodymyr Zelensky signed a new law expanding the privatisation of state-owned banks in this country. While this war's been going on, they've been changing a bunch of laws in order to make it easier for foreign investors and outside organisations to buy Ukrainian state-owned stuff. Minerals, mines, things like that. Why would that be happening at a time like this, when what we're supposed to be doing, I thought, was Putin's evil. Putin's an evil external aggressor. All we're trying to do is oppose Putin and survive and protect the Ukrainian people. Why are all these laws being changed that create business opportunity? Pay attention to that. It's hugely significant. In fact, it's defining, almost as if the humanitarian argument is irrelevant window dressing, and really what matters are all these financial opportunities. Let me know in the comments and chat what you think, based on what you know about your government, they're actually prioritising. It follows the Ukrainian government's announcement in July of its large-scale privatization 2024 program that's intended to drive foreign investment into the country. Large assets slated for privatization currently include the country's biggest producer of titanium ore, a leading producer of concrete products, and a mining processing plant. So amidst all this talk of, we've got to stand firm, we've got to help Ukraine, we've got to support Ukraine, round the back, in the back channels, people are doing deals for titanium ore. Why is that? You would think at this time, explicitly and almost religiously, the people that are asking British troops to enter into a war, French troops, while departing from US foreign policy when it comes to this war, will be ensuring that every decision they make couldn't, under scrutiny, look like exploitative opportunism. But here we are. Looks like there's a lot of opportunities. In fact, they're admitting there are opportunities. Ukraine envisaged privatizing the country's roughly 3,500 state-owned enterprises in a law in 2018, which said foreign citizens and companies could become owners. Remember, there was a coup in 2014. In 2018, the law was changed to allow foreign companies to buy their stuff. So you're starting to look now at figures like George Soros, companies like BlackRock, Vanguard. What's going on? What is this really about? Is there anyone left who wants their personal tax dollars flowing into this conflict with the mistaken belief that it's somehow benefiting Ukrainian kids? Another law enacted in 2023 allows large-scale assets to be sold to foreigners or Ukrainians during the martial law regime. Britain's main economic aid project in Ukraine runs from 2022 to 2025 and is called the Good Governance Fund. Nice name. Catchy. One of its aims is to ensure that Ukraine adopts and implements economic reforms that create a more inclusive economy, enhancing trade opportunities with the UK. What a beautiful bit of bureaucratic language that actually reveals that the true intention is to create financial opportunities. It ain't about protecting Ukrainian people. It's about exploiting Ukrainian resources. We're just arguing who gets them. Does America get some of them? Do EU countries get some? Does Britain get some? Heaven forbid that the Ukrainian people's interests should be protected and preserved. Britain's privatisation agenda in Ukraine is part of a wider push by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, which routinely promote privatisation in low-income countries, often as a condition of providing aid. The reason this conflict is unique is not because of the aggression of Putin, but because media reporting now exposes the complexity of these types of conflicts. If that were not true, you wouldn't have the looming spectre of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank entering. These kind of pressures always exist in conflicts of this nature, i.e., those organisations don't lend money to countries that are in crisis unless those countries say, we're going to take on a bunch of debt from you, or we're going to sell your favoured partners a bunch of our resources. That's how globalism works. What we are living in now is globalism versus emergent nationalism. Zelensky's recent announcement on state-owned banks is based on World Bank recommendations and gives international donors a role in selecting financial advisors for the sales. So Zelensky has just changed the law around state-owned banks because the World Bank has told him to do it. Do you think these policies will somehow favour the international finance industry? I'm gripped. I wonder. Earlier this month, the World Bank announced it was allocating $593 million to support Ukraine's private sector focused on improving the regulatory environment. Improving the regulatory environment means we're taking over. You're going to change the regulations so it's beneficial to the interests we represent. One of the conditions imposed by the IMF in last year's $15 billion loan to the Ukraine is for the government in Kiev to produce a strategy on privatization and for that strategy to be favourable. Similarly, the EU's recently agreed Ukraine plan, which will provide 50 billion euros to Ukraine in grants and loans during 24 to 27, is also conditional on, among other things, the entry into force of the legislation on corporate governance of state-owned enterprises. Now, I know this sounds a little bit boring at points, but what they're essentially saying is support in this war is contingent on Ukraine carving up state-owned assets and selling them to our preferred partners. That's disgusting enough on its own. But when you're inviting British kids, French kids, American kids, were it not for Trump, to die in this conflict, it becomes nefarious almost beyond measure and imagination. And when you think back to Keir Starmer saying, it is with great regret and reluctance that I'm going to put on a flak jacket and pretend to care about war, you realise what you're dealing with. Just because it's boring, it doesn't mean it's not evil. Some companies stand for diversity quotas and ESG scores. 1775 Coffee stands for bold flavour, real quality, and the kind of work ethic that would get half of DC fired on day one. If your morning fuel should actually taste like coffee and not like the liquid equivalent of Biden's farts, you're in the right place. Dark roast hits harder than a Trump tariff. medium roast keeps it bold without the bitterness. And Vitality Mushroom Blend fuels the fight with lion's mane, cordyceps and reishi. Real energy, no synthetic garbage, straight from Bill Gates' lab. Yeah, real coffee for real Americans. Like me. Weak coffee is for the weak, and at Rumble, weak has never been part of the mission. No fillers, no shortcuts, and proudly backed by a platform that does not cut corners, water things down, or settle for mediocrity. For pods, whole bean, or ground coffee, head to 1775coffee.com, use the code BRAND for 15% off. Now, the fact is that since the beginning of the conflict, Britain has been supporting the globalist agenda, particularly when Biden was in power. Now, Biden's not in power, so the true nefarious nature of this conflict is being exposed. Let's have a look at how the legacy media try to frame this in a beneficial way.
Since the start of this conflict, the UK has been one of Ukraine's closest and strongest allies.
We're close, we're strong. That's what we are, close and strong. Doesn't matter if the Prime Minister is that blonde one, that brown one, or this new boring one. We're doing the same thing. Almost like it don't matter who you vote for, you're going to get someone who's going to send your taxes and your children into this unwinnable, pointless, appalling war.
More often than not, putting our money where our mouth is.
Yeah, we're really hard. We're putting our money where our mouth is, which is actually unhygienic.
The UK has trained Ukrainian soldiers previously, and Keir Starmer says he's willing to commit British troops to potential peacekeeping.
Yeah, just peacekeeping. And there we have it. Keir Starmer in a flak jacket, shaking hands. Exactly what you want. A lawyer and a bureaucrat, a person that would deny everything until you can prove otherwise, then simply blame someone else for whatever problem he's been previously denying, is now in charge of British lives.
But there are questions about how feasible that is.
It is not going to be very easy to do it. First place, you've got all the constraints on the British side. We don't have many troops.
Bit of a problem to send troops in a war if you don't have any troops. It seems like Britain's army are not prepared or ready to enter into a conflict of this nature, even if it's just as a peacekeeping force or whatever euphemism they're using to mask the fact that British taxpayer money and the British military are being sacrificed in the pursuit of a goal that seems increasingly dubious. If it weren't dubious, why are BlackRock, World Bank and IMF involved? These are not archangels. And then the BlackRock came and said unto Mary, you will have a boy child. And then IMF guarded the gates of Eden. And then the World Bank came and said, do not be afraid, for you are a chosen one. These institutions, these bureaucracies are ultimately about supporting elites in ways that can't be impacted, curtailed or incurred by the will of the people. That's what they're there for. That's what BlackRock, IMF, World Bank is. The preservation of elite power, no matter what you do politically. And just in case you think I'm a hysterical conspiracy theorist, and hey, maybe sometimes I am, here's Vladimir Zelensky himself name-checking the powers that are ultimately going to benefit and facilitate this advancing globalist agenda.
We have already managed to attract attention and have cooperation with such giants of the international financial and investment world as BlackRock, JP Morgan, and Goldman Sachs. Such American brands as Starlink or Westinghouse have already become part of our Ukrainian way.
It's not the Olympics where you've got McDonald's hypocritically sponsoring an event that's about health and fitness and denigrating Jesus Christ. You saw the opening ceremony, right? What a coincidence. This is a war in which people are going to die. Him name-checking those organizations is the revelation of the power that ultimately precipitates and necessitates ongoing war. And for Zelensky to say, the Ukrainian way, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? You mean the way of the Ukrainian people? Like, it's like they're sort of like working, tilling a field or getting some stuff done or singing folk songs to one another. There ain't no Ukrainian way if you yield to the World Bank and the IMF and BlackRock. That's globalism. Part of what globalism means, as you know, if you're living in a Western country, is your borders will be flooded, your assets will be stripped, and elite powers that you cannot reach or even conceptualize sometimes will seize the reins of your nation and seize the lives of your children. Also, Tucker Carlson has some pretty unique and interesting insights that completely alter the way you see this conflict.
Alps, which is probably the most expensive town in the world. I was not there to ski, for the record. But the whole town is Ukrainian. all the visitors are Ukrainian, and they're rolling into Hermes and dropping $1 million in an afternoon. Okay. So it's all through Europe. You see this. The richest people are the Ukrainians. That money is ours. It belongs to me and you and every other American taxpayer. That's where it's going. Second fact, not guess, fact is Ukrainian military is selling a huge percentage, up to half of the arms that we send them. Half. And I'm not guessing about this. I know that for a fact, okay? Not speculation. And they're selling it, and a lot of it's winding up with the drug cartels on our border. So this is a crime, what's happening. Our intel agencies are fully aware of this. You tell me they're not profiting from this. Of course, you think the CIA is not profiting from this? Yes, they are. I can't prove that, but I believe that. What they don't know this. I know this, but they don't know this. They know this. And no one is saying it. Like, no American seems aware of this.
Tucker Carlson there exemplified the challenge of modern political life. Now, these matters are not veiled. You can have populist, good communicators giving you insights on the true nature of war and the true nature of power. You might believe Tucker, you might deny Tucker, you might oppose Tucker, you might disagree with Tucker, but it seems pretty likely, doesn't it, that the CIA and deep state organizations have relationships with the Ukrainian deep state and ultimately facilitate the maneuvering and movements of groups like the IMF and the World Bank and BlackRock, etc. And when someone like Trump gets into power and starts saying we're going to start sacking everybody and getting rid of the deep state, it's a massive disruption to global elite power. Ensconced within American institutions that are also funded by you, CIA, FBI, etc., are all sorts of bureaucrats that have the kind of affiliations that mean that that trajectory can go uninterrupted. The CIA are in general support of it, the IMF are in general support of it, BlackRock are in general support of it. That is the nature of this coordination. Now we've got this different type of reporting, these different type of communications, where someone like Tucker Carlson or Lex Friedman or Joe Rogan or whoever can just get on your phone and tell you the facts of the matter. No wonder you have to create new categories, misinformation, disinformation. Really what's required is the ability to continue business as usual. That's what they're trying to do in Ukraine right now, at least the British are, while clearly in Trump's America a different trajectory is being explored. And then you need the ability to prevent people communicating about it, because if we can communicate about it, we can stop it.
In April of 2022,
but this conflict's been going for a while. Let's have a look what Bobby Kennedy said about events way back a few years ago.
President Biden sent Boris Johnson to Ukraine to force President Zelensky to tear up a peace agreement that he and the Russians had already signed, and the Russians were withdrawing troops from Kiev and Donbass and Lugansk. And that peace agreement would have brought peace to the region and would have allowed Donbass and Lugansk to remain part of Ukraine. President Biden stated that month that his objective in the war was regime change in Russia. His Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin simultaneously explained that America's purpose in the war was to exhaust the Russian army, to degrade its capacity to fight anywhere else in the world. These objectives, of course, have nothing to do with what they were telling Americans about protecting Ukraine's sovereignty.
In a way, I see the Ukraine-Russia conflict as a partner to the COVID pandemic. These massive global stories were unable to be contained and narrativized in the way that globalists would have preferred because of independent media reporting. Because in real time, we were getting counter-narratives that seemed more plausible than what we were being told by our governments and our media. And there's a reason for that. It's because independent media has been telling us the truth, whether it was the pipeline or whether it's the VAC, or whether it's the lab leak, or whether it was those missiles not coming from Poland, or whether it's the CIA labs in Ukraine. Narratives emerge so quickly that they've had to create the category of misinformation and disinformation just to maintain control of their globalist agenda. Now that America has gone all populist and MAGA, countries like the UK and France are dreadfully exposed, but not just nations. The World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, NATO, then agencies within America, the CIA, the FBI, all of them are undertaking a massive reckoning now. So someone like Keir Starmer, flak jacket or no flak jacket, is dreadfully exposed. He has to stand up in front of the world's media and therefore world's population now and say, we're supporting this war, I'm with reluctantly sending troops, I'm reluctantly taking your tax dollars. And they've got to cross their fingers and hope that we don't look at that guy right in the eyes and say, wait a minute, I don't trust him. Maybe we're being lied to. Maybe this Ukraine conflict is about selling state assets and doing globalist deals. Maybe we can't trust leaders like Keir Starmer. Maybe they don't represent the best interests of the British people. Maybe there's a reason that farmers are up in arms on the street, why people feel disgusted, disgraced, disgraced and broken by the immigration crisis in the UK. Maybe there's a reason people feel furious about the incarceration and imprisonment of people for free speech online. The COVID pandemic and the Ukraine-Russia war are the pivotal stories that have changed the perspectives of millions of people when it comes to the true nature of globalism and the true nature of power, and has helped us to recognize, in fact, that nationalism is likely going to be a first step against globalism. Furthermore, if you look at it a little more deeply, and I don't see why we shouldn't, you start to see that if people don't love God and don't believe in any resolute universal truths, whether you call it common sense or Jesus Christ, then people in positions of power are just arbitrarily coming up with an agenda and then imposing their will by violence. There's no resolute, absolute principles. One day they have their pronouns in their bios, the next day they don't have their pronouns in the bios. 1 minute they're telling you this is a good and just war, the next minute they're telling you there was a completely corrupt war. 1 minute they're telling you to take these vaccines, the next minute they're telling you should never have taken those vaccines. You cannot trust them. You can never trust them. You must never trust them again. But that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments and chat?
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.